Okay, great. Thank you everybody for joining us today for the Emerging Leader Speaker Series, presented in partnership with Benchmark Strategies. I'm Kat. I'm the Associate Director here at the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus, and I'll be one of your moderators today, along with two other folks you'll meet in just a second. First, a couple notes about the MWPC. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization committed to increasing the number of women in elected office and in appointed public policy positions. We seek to engage women of all ages in the political process through events, workshops, and exciting programming like this series. We celebrated our 50th anniversary last December, and we hope that you'll keep celebrating with us all year. We're going to keep turning 50 all year, so tune in. We're thrilled to partner with Benchmark Strategies on this series, and I'll turn it over to my friends Nicole and Jessica from Benchmark.
Thanks, Kat. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Harrington, and I am the Assistant Vice President at Benchmark Strategies. Benchmark is a Boston-based public affairs and public relations consulting firm. Our team is proud to collaborate with over 175 companies and organizations from around the world, and we are proud to partner with the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus on the second conversation of this series. And today, we are excited to hear from Berkshire County District Attorney Andrea Harrington. And I'll pass it over to you, Jess.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Morris. I'm also an Assistant Vice President of Public Affairs at Benchmark Strategies. I'm proud to introduce District Attorney Andrea Harrington. Andrea Harrington is the first woman elected as Berkshire's District Attorney. She took office in 2019 and delivers a reform agenda of vigorously prosecuting dangerous offenders while improving public safety through prevention and community engagement. Andrea has practiced in the area of criminal law for over 15 years. She graduated from the University of Washington and earned a JD from American University Washington College of Law in 2003. Those studies inspired Andrea's work representing convicted death row inmates in their post-conviction appeals in South Florida. Andrea returned to raise her family in Berkshire County, where she grew up and represented defendants in appellate and trial matters, family law, and also plaintiff side employment litigation. She's a graduate of Emerge Massachusetts and a co-founder of the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus Berkshire Committee, has served as a delegate to the Massachusetts Democratic Party and on the Richmond School Committee. Andrea and her family reside in the town of Richmond in Massachusetts. So welcome, District Attorney Harrington. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's really an honor and a pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you so much. So Kat, Nicole, and I will be kicking off the moderated discussion. And for audience members, please feel free to submit your questions through chat. So in 2018, you upended the status quo to become the first female district attorney in the history of Berkshire County. Tell us about the lessons and challenges as a woman candidate running against an incumbent.
Yeah, there were a lot of people here in my community who were surprised by what I accomplished. But for me, the reason why I was successful in my campaign was because we had a grassroots campaign, and I was, I understood my community. I grew up there. I was raising my family there. I was really dealing with the biggest challenges that we have in Berkshire County through my work in the courts. And I just had my finger on the pulse of what people, I think, needed to feel safe and to feel like they were, being represented by their district attorney. So I had a very strong vision for how I saw the DA as, working to lift people up. So, I think for me, the biggest lesson was that I, needed to trust myself and to trust my community, and that, they were just further ahead of where, our elected leaders at the time were, and certainly where law enforcement was. So, that experience really taught me that my vision is valid and that my way of seeing the world and my view of justice resonates with the people in my community, and that just because maybe that's not where the leaders were, that didn't mean that it wasn't where the voters were. So that was a big lesson for me in kind of trusting myself, and that I had a very powerful vision that people believed in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And then also, prior to becoming a DA, you were involved in work representing convicted death row inmates in post-conviction appeals, and also worked as a public defender. How have these experiences shaped your vision and priorities in the DA office?
Yeah, I got a lot of, mostly the biggest area of pushback that I got in my race was that I had never been a prosecutor. And I'm so grateful now that I'm in this position for the experience that I did have, because I feel like that experience, representing people on death row and working in the courts in my community was exactly what I needed to do the things that I set out to do. I set out to really transform the criminal justice system in Berkshire County, and we've been incredibly successful. I have really been able to do the things that I promised people that I would do, and it's really based on my experience. When I worked in Florida, I was really depressed and sickened by the way that Florida put these just amounts of resources into a system, the death penalty system, into a system that just punished people, that didn't protect public safety at all in any way. And we did an entire social history for our clients, and you could see along the way where if they had had different kinds of interventions, if they had had health care, if they had had stable families, then these tragedies could have been avoided. So those lessons stayed with me, and that is foundational for my vision of what public safety should be. Public safety is not just coming in after somebody's been hurt and punishing people. Public safety is about making sure that people are not victimized in the first place. So that kind of experience absolutely informed my approach to my position. And also when we came back to Massachusetts and I started working in the courts, I was pretty surprised that in progressive Massachusetts, we similar to Florida, we didn't have the death penalty, but we were very similarly putting a lot of resources into a system of punishment. And really, I saw people that were poor, people that were, struggling with mental health issues, substance use disorder. We've had a really difficult economy in Berkshire County. So, it was just very similar lessons for me that I saw happening in the courts in Berkshire County to what I saw happening in Florida. And
That's fine.
Absolutely. I think the end of justice question perfectly segues into what we're talking about. So DA Harrington, you are the first woman elected as DA of Berkshire County, and you've been a champion to women and girls and really everybody that's experienced gender-based violence. And you also spearheaded the creation of Berkshire County's first domestic violence or domestic and sexual violence task force. So first, what is the importance of shining a light on this particular area of crime?
Well, in Berkshire County, gender-based violence is, I think, the most kind of serious form of violence that we have. We had 10 women and children murdered here in domestic violence incidents within like a 3-year period. So it's pretty shocking, the kinds of cases that we see happening in the district attorney's office. And we've taken gender-based violence on in a really big way. We've made a lot of changes around really changing the culture of law enforcement in Berkshire County to prioritize responses to violent crime. And previously it was very, very focused on the war on drugs. And so we had a drug task force that was started in the early 90s that was to address the drug trade in Berkshire County. So really the best officers in the county were focused on drug investigations. And I feel that, public safety really demands that we address violent crime in particular. So we added a violent crime section to the law enforcement task force to support our smaller police departments in doing really sophisticated investigations in these important cases. So we've really worked to improve our assessment and response. And I think that is critical to changing a culture of violence against women and girls. What we're seeing now, happening with all kinds of like hate incidents across the nation, and we certainly see them locally, but there's a lot of talk about accountability. There has to be accountability for these kinds of domestic violence, gender-based violence, hate incidents, if we're going to really change this culture of violence where it's really acceptable to commit violence against women. And it's tough, it's not easy. We bring tough cases to trial. We provide victims with the support that they need to get through a difficult trial process. And sometimes, we get jurors that, just don't get it. They don't get that a woman's testimony is evidence. They want to see corroboration. They want to see forensic evidence. It's not easy, but we're going to keep at it. And we've really worked around prevention as well. We started a domestic violence high risk team. And this is to prevent violence before it happens, where we monitor cases that are at high risk of domestic violence. We've implemented evidence-based prosecution. We've done a lot of training for police and for prosecutors. We really want to do more proactive human trafficking investigations.
That's really incredible. And it sounds like with the task force and the high risk team, you've taken on some really, you've introduced some new initiatives that are really going to change things in the county. Are there other initiatives that we haven't touched on yet that you've implemented that you'd like to share with us about?
In terms of our battling domestic violence, we started a special victims unit, which didn't exist previous. We brought in people who speak Spanish. We have Spanish speaking victim advocates now and forensic interviewers who can do forensic interviews of children in Spanish. Our big push now is to really connect and make vulnerable populations feel like they are safe coming to law enforcement. So that's a lot of work throughout the community, particularly training law enforcement. That's going to be a big part of our focus over the next couple of years, is working on that. And for me, our work that we do combating racial disparities in the legal system goes very much hand in hand with our work in trying to combat domestic violence and hate incidents, because people who are vulnerable are not going to pick up the phone and call the police or call my office when they need help if they're afraid of law enforcement. And that's something that we do hear a lot, people that are fearful of law enforcement because there's a history of oppression from law enforcement, and it's people see what they see on the TV is what they think is happening in their own community as well. So for me, our racial justice work and our work, better representing vulnerable victims, they're very much go hand in hand.
That's really incredible. And I know that you were elected in 2019, so that's a truly incredible, amount of new perspective and reform you've brought in only a few years. And I love to hear that there's sort of a plan for the next years look like. I have one more sort of part question here, but I'm wondering, you are the first woman to be DA in Berkshire County. And I'm wondering how your perspective, sort of as the first woman in this office, informs your work and how you approach things, and having women in office in general.
Yeah, I definitely, being the first female is an honor, but in and of itself, isn't particularly meaningful unless I use the power of my position to advocate for people in my community who are vulnerable and who need the protection of law enforcement. And I very much have used my position to do that. And yeah, 100%, it comes from my experience growing up. When I was young, my mom worked for United Parcel Service. She had a good union job, and she was getting harassing phone calls. And it turned out, to be somebody that she worked with, and she ended up quitting her job and taking a job cleaning houses. And so that had a real impact on my family. And, I definitely bring that kind of experience with me to my work, and always, sticking up for the underdog. And it's hard because I have definitely taken on a status quo in Berkshire County. I think that the role of gatekeepers, is what holds female electeds back. I think it is not the voters, it's not the people in the community who supported me, and I think who continue to support the work that I'm doing. But it really is the gatekeepers. For me, I've had a very difficult time with our local newspaper, and it's like the standards as applied to me are very, very different than they are to the other men who have held the position that I now hold. And, as women, we're trained for that. I think women tend to work harder. We hold ourselves up to higher standards because we have to in order to succeed. And I certainly experienced that as a trial lawyer. I experience that now. For example, in my race, I was running against the male incumbent who was appointed by the governor to give him a leg up in the race. And, the newspaper endorsed him in the Democratic primary, and he lost the Democratic primary. And then he launched a writing campaign, and the newspaper endorsed him in his writing campaign. And when I won the primary, they wrote an editorial saying that the district attorney shouldn't be an elected position. Like, that's a pretty extreme position to take because you don't like the candidate who won. So, that's definitely been, I think, the biggest challenge that I've had to grapple with is the sexism that I face from the media. But, I think that we're overcoming it. I just keep hammering on my record of accomplishments. I told people what I was going to do, and I did exactly what I said I was going to do. And, I think that we're rising above it, and we're gonna keep rising above it.
Well, it's great to hear about how determined you are from, your, so we've heard about in your bio to your current work. I do want to see if our MWPC PAC chair, Samantha Bone, who asked a question in the chat, is able to ask her question right now. If not, I'll be happy to read it. But Sam, if you want to unmute, you're welcome to. Okay, I will read out Sam's question real quick, and I think we'll address that, and then we'll chat about Nicole's piece. So Sam says, thank you for everything you do. There has been a movement within gender violence prevention to begin a change in narrative, or to change the narrative away from victim-based language in data reporting. I'm curious. Oh, Sam, let me try to unmute you one more time. Let me know if that worked. All right, well, Sam, thanks so much. I'm gonna read your question, and feel free to keep chatting with us here in the chat. Okay, so there has been this movement to change the narrative away from victim-based language and data reporting. And just curious what you think. The idea is to emphasize accountability of the perpetrator. For example, instead of reporting the number of women sexually harassed in a year, it will be reported as the number of men who committed, or whoever, who committed violence against women, if it indecent men. So we're curious if you think that that's a helpful approach.
This is the first time I've been asked this question, and I love it. I think that language is incredibly important, and we absolutely need to interrogate our language and flip the narrative. So, when I talk about this with domestic violence, it's sort of like people always ask, well, why does she stay? Why does she stay? And we want to change the story to like, why are, people committing violence against their loved ones, right? So I think that idea goes hand in hand with that. So thank you for raising that. I hadn't thought of that earlier, but I definitely very interested in pursuing that.
Well, thank you so much. I know Nicole has a couple great questions, so she'll take it from here.
Thanks, Kat. I guess the last kind of big question I had, DA Harrington, was just during the past few weeks, we know there has been much discussion following the leak of the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court draft opinion. And I know a lot of people's minds have been asking, what does overturning Roe mean for Massachusetts? And just curious how this news has impacted your thinking serving as DA.
Well, thank you for raising that. Women's reproductive freedom is, I think, just central. It's central to the work that I do. It's central to my identity. And, I think about all of these issues in terms of like my role as a prosecutor. So I did sign on to an amicus brief in the Dobbs case with about 100 other law enforcement officials from across the country, encouraging that Roe be upheld. And it goes back to the work that we were talking about before. If we want to build safety of people, with the government and with law enforcement, criminalizing people's personal health decisions is incredibly counterproductive. So I have pledged not to prosecute people for receiving abortions or or medical providers for providing abortion services. I've signed on to that with a number of law enforcement leaders from across the country. And, here in Massachusetts, gratefully, they passed the Roe Act, which I was a proponent of. But, in the event that we see some kind of nationwide ban, it's going to be, your local district attorney is going to become very important in this discussion. So I've been part of a national group, leading the discussion and the charge around protecting women's rights to make their own healthcare decisions.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's incredible. And like you said, the importance of local DAs in the next few months is going to be so important. So it's so true. I guess one final question is just kind of a more simple one. Just what is next here in terms of the Roe decision? Like, what can we do, I guess, as young professionals in these districts across Massachusetts? Like, how can we lift up the voices of women who are not being listened to right now, whether it's through activism or advocacy or getting out the vote, and give women and transgender people the fundamental right to decide? I guess, yeah, what can we do as everyday people?
Yeah, I think that sometimes we can feel like because we're in Massachusetts, these issues maybe don't impact us as much, but I think that it's things can change. So I think it's incredibly important that we, keep our voices loud. I think that it's so important for people to get out and to vote in our upcoming elections. I think marching right now is critical to show that like this is an issue that is important to my generation and to your generation. I think when I talk to women, in their 70s and their 60s, they're like really shocked that we're still fighting this fight. And unfortunately, we still have to fight for these basic rights. But I think that all of us need to just continue having these kinds of discussions and support NARAL and support Planned Parenthood. And, even though we're in Massachusetts, I think it's still important that we continue to lift up this issue.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Kat, I don't know if we want to now just open up. I know it's a little past the half hour to open up maybe for audience Q&A. I know members submitted some questions beforehand too that we have. If we want to get
Yeah,
that started.
absolutely. So I do invite folks to put things in the chat. We have some emails from beforehand. I know that Jessica had another question as well, so I just want to give her a chance.
Yeah, so in the meantime, feel free to put your questions in the chat, anything you want to ask the DA. But I just wanted to ask DA Harrington, just reflecting back on your journey in law and public service, who in your circle, in your world, inspired you to become not only the first in your family to attend college, but also to eventually earn a law degree and move forward in your career?
Oh yeah, thank you for that question. Growing up, I very much come from like a working class family, and I really didn't know a lot of lawyers. And the lawyers that I did know about were people that I saw on TV. But I definitely was inspired by. I had some really amazing teachers. My guidance counselor in high school, I graduated from Taconic High School, Nancy Wachowski, who helped me with the college process. She was instrumental in helping me recognize that that was an achievable goal for me. And when I was a first year student in law school, I had an amazing professor, Angela Jordan Davis, who was my criminal law professor. She very much inspired me to become a defense attorney and then to become a district attorney, because 20 plus years ago when I was in criminal law, she was like one of the first people that was talking about the ways that prosecutors were using their discretion and how it was leading to this just really horrific over incarceration of Black people in this country. And she planted a seed because she talked about how it was important for people to become prosecutors who really cared about social justice and racial justice. And she inspired me to do my work representing people on death row. And when I came back to Berkshire County and I saw what was happening in the courts here in my community, to poor people in particular, but certainly people of color are overrepresented in the court system in Berkshire County. I just remembered those lessons, and she definitely gave me a vision for justice that I think has been very powerful for my community and has allowed me to have a really big impact on the issues that I care about.
That's great. Thank you so much. I know, at least for me, the professors and teachers in my life definitely help shape so much of who I am today. So it's really great to hear that.
I think Jessica and I actually won the same professors.
Yeah,
Who inspired us. So DA Harrington, one thing that I love here at the MWPC is getting to interact with so many fantastic elected women. And one of our favorite things to hear about is about folks collaborating with each other and the work we can get done when we work together. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a story about a time you collaborated with either another elected official or a staffer. I know you also did Emerge, so you have Emerge Sisters to accomplish something that you maybe couldn't have done if you didn't have another elected woman to work with.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I could definitely talk about a lot of different collaborations, but before this call, I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office visiting with U.S. Attorney Rollins. We brought a group of our Youth Advisory Board members to meet the U.S. Attorney. And she told a story about how we met, which was we were both running for DA in 2018. And we met at an MWPC event in Boston. Well, we didn't meet at the event. We were at the event and we went next door to the bar. And we were both sitting at the bar and we didn't know each other at all. We happened to sit next to each other. And I was talking to my friend about my race and she was eavesdropping and she was like, I'm running for DA. And I said, I'm running for DA. And so that was how Rachel and I met at the MWPC. And so we were both a part of Fair and Just Prosecution, which is a national network of district attorneys that, are working, we're reformed district attorneys, really working to tackle racial justice issues, gender-based violence, create transparency, in the criminal legal system. Rachel and I, we went to Portugal to study their approach to drug policy. We went to Alabama to study, the history of racism in law enforcement in particular. So, I mean, she's been a huge collaborator on all of the things I've done. We've been, she's really inspiring. I was a big supporter of hers when she was nominated to the position of U.S. Attorney. I was really proud to stand with her. So, that's a pretty powerful example.
I think that's a great example. And we were so thrilled by her nomination. It's a great historic moment. Do you remember which MWPC event it was? I'm wondering if
I
it's been a lot.
Yeah, I could probably go back and look at my calendar. It was next door to a bar. I know that it was like a really nice, like fancy kind of a place. It was a beautiful place. And like everybody was there. Deb Goldberg was there, and it was a big deal. It was in 2018. I think it was in the winter because it was cold out. It was around Martin Luther King Day because she made a joke about her coat being stolen on Martin Luther King Day. So I will find out for you though.
Well, that's amazing. I love to hear that. I love to hear about connections being made, and I love it when they happen at MWPC events.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I don't think we have any outstanding questions in the chat, but I do want to ask my co-hosts if they have any.
Yes, I can jump in. Actually, there's one question I know, DA Harrington, that one of your big priorities is focusing on public health responses and prioritizing like treatment over incarceration for those suffering from like mental health or substance use disorders. And I was just thinking, I know the Senate and House right now in Massachusetts, they're trying to also do a focus on a mental health bill, and especially following COVID, just the increase in mental health. So I was just curious to see your thoughts on how we can improve, I guess, serving the people in our justice system in that way and focusing more on a public health angle.
Yeah, thank you for raising that issue. And it's for the police and for the prosecutors and for the courts. We are filling in to bridge, the gaps between a broken system. And so many of the people that end up in crisis, are being responded to by the police because they haven't been able to get the kind of treatment and just basic health care that they need. And so this is a crisis. This has been a crisis in Berkshire County. It takes months and months for people to get an appointment with a mental health professional. So, I'm starting to think, like, how can we be more creative in addressing this issue? I'm really interested in maybe implementing more peer support programs. So because of the lack of, professional mental health services. So, I think that, local municipalities really need support from state government and from the federal government. And there needs to be, fair wages that are being paid to mental health workers, and there needs to be parity. So, the local municipalities are really kind of left holding the bag with a lot of these challenges. It's a structural issue for us. So I'm happy the state legislature's taking it up, and it's going to continue to be. It's going to continue to be a problem, especially with the rates of depression that we see happening in young people post-COVID. And we can't continue to use law enforcement as a band-aid for a broken mental health system.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I wanted to invite Charlotte Golar-Ritchie, who's one of our MWPC board members, as well as a former elected official and just a really great person. She asked a question in the chat. Charlotte, if you want to go ahead and ask it, you should be able to unmute yourself. Otherwise, happy to read it.
Thank you, Kat. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much, DA Harrington, for your leadership, your service. My question is actually an appreciation and a question. One is just to say I did read your op-ed last year you co-wrote about the plea tracker project. And for those of us on this line who strongly support a more equitable criminal justice system, which I think I can safely say all of us do, I was wondering if you could just remind us about why plea bargaining is important and equity in plea bargaining is crucial to trying to change things in the system.
Well, thank you for that question, and thank you also for everything that you've done to support women in politics. Yes, I co-wrote that op-ed with Satana DeBerry, who is the district attorney in Raleigh-Durham, and she was up for re-election last night, and she just creamed her opponents. The last number I saw was she got about 80% of the vote. So this is a really important project because there's very little data collection that happens in the criminal legal system. So we've been putting a lot of money and a lot of resources into a system that really hasn't given us a good return on our investment. I think when you look at recidivism rates in particular. And so this effort is to really help us collect data and understand the impacts of plea negotiations and really the role of prosecutors and what are we doing that perpetuates racial disparities, because 95% of all criminal cases are resolved by way of a plea. And there was a study that was commissioned by Justice Gantz, done by Harvard, that did show some really stark racial disparities that, Latinx people, Black people are getting longer sentences than their white counterparts. And a lot of those are happening because of the way pleas are negotiated. So this is a really detailed study of how prosecutors and the role of judges, the role of prosecutors, somewhat the role of defense attorneys, and in understanding how plea negotiations work and how they operate. And for me, there's a big call for police and for prosecutors and for courts to address racial disparities. And this is a way that I can say, like, my office is leading by example. I'm not just pointing the finger at the police. We are saying, like, we're going to take a hard look at ourselves and we're going to understand what it is that we're doing that is making things less fair. And I know that we're going to find things that we need to improve. And it takes courage to get these, to really dig in and to get this kind of information. But this is the first study of its kind nationally. And so I think it's going to really inform criminal justice policy at a national level.
Great, thank you so much. Kat, I don't know. I don't know if we had one more question that was submitted through the chat.
I don't see any, but I know that Justin is messaging with somebody. Any other questions? Okay, so with that in mind, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Jessica, sorry, you still muted.
Oh yeah, I think I saw Samantha. Did you raise your hand? Okay, Samantha raised her hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I can go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, everybody. I was on my phone before and I could not unmute, but now I'm on my laptop and can. So thank you for your patience before. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm Samantha Bone. I am co-chair of the MWPC PAC and former Emerge classmate as well. So hello to all of the Emerge women out there. I just wanted to say thank you, Andrea Harrington, for coming tonight, for answering that question about language and narrative, because I agree with you. I think it's so important the way that we portray these violent crimes in the media and to the victims themselves so they feel validated. So just thank you again. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Okay, well, I think that is all of our questions tonight. If there's any we missed, feel free to put them in the chat right now. But otherwise, everybody, thank you so much for being here. We are going to wrap up our formal program. I'm going to let our friends from Benchmark close us out. But if you want to hang out for a minute after we wrap up, we will be talking about the amendment that we mentioned earlier to the Senate budget, addressing one of our legislative priorities that we did select at the annual meeting. But DA Harrington, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for all the work that you're doing and all of the new perspectives you're bringing to the office and addressing to your office and addressing really critical issues.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the discussion. The questions were amazing. And thanks for creating a network of women because, I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do without having a network and without having a sisterhood and having support from people across the state. So thanks for everything that MWPC does.
Thank you so much, DA Harrington. On behalf of the Benchmark Strategies team, we also just really thank you for being here. Again, with what we mentioned before, we're doing these monthly Emerging Leaders speaker series. So tune in for the next one. Just really want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and especially to DA Harrington. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Kat, I don't know, do you know if Chelsea's able to jump in and talk about the
Chelsea,
amendment, or Dawn?
Chelsea isn't going to be able to unmute, but I am happy to tell you all what's going on. Nicole, thank you. Yeah, that is the proper segue. So for those of you who, and Dawn, I'll let you unmute, but for those of you who weren't with us at the annual meeting this year, the MWPC members did vote on 3 legislative priorities for us this year. And one of them had a very exciting update like yesterday evening. And we are going to be taking action on it later this week. So we wanted to give you a quick update on what's happening and how you can help. Dawn, do you want to tell us about it?
Sure. We are going to be asking the senators to become a co-sponsor for Senator Jalen's amendment, number 168. And the premise is that if you raise campaign finance funds, that you can use them to cover childcare if you need childcare during a political campaign event. So this is really a boon to working parents and not just women candidates, but all people with small children. And so it's been a priority. It's been passed in like 26 different states. And we would love to show our membership support for this amendment. So Kat, tell them about the plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So over the next day or so, you'll be receiving an email from us. Everybody that attended will if you want to get involved even more, you know how to email us. So over the next few days, we do ask that you reach out to your state senator, and we'll be providing you a link so you can figure out who that is if you don't know them yet. And you should reach out to them by email or by phone or by Twitter and ask them to co-sponsor this amendment. The deadline that we're looking for is by Monday. So reaching out to them tomorrow or Friday, I think is really sort of our goal. So they become co-sponsors by Monday for this exciting budget amendment. We will be providing some draft text, a draft phone script, and any other support you need, and we will be right there with you.
I just want to add too that Chelsea Aquino, who is dealing with a small child right now, is our lead on all legislative activities. And she's been the one guiding us through this process. We've also reached out to an organization called Vote Mama, and it's run by a woman who ran for Congress. And because she petitioned the FEC, she's the reason why people are able to start covering their childcare expenses with their campaign funds. So it's a really interesting initiative that we've seen, and it helps level that playing field. So we'll hear more from Vote Mama as well in the next day or two. But we want to be able to push for Massachusetts and join our sisters across the nation as they work toward this goal.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dawn.
Yeah, thank you for everybody who came tonight and who hung out to learn about our new legislative action.